It honestly feels like Spawn creator Todd McFarlane has been through hell and back trying to bring Simmons' story back to the big screen. Over the years, names like Jamie Foxx and Jeremy Renner have been attached, but the project has constantly stalled, almost like Mela Bolger himself has been pulling the strings. But now, McFarlane has finally shared some news that sounds a lot more promising than anything we've heard in years. In a recent interview with Comic Book, he revealed that a director is basically locked in to give Spawn the big, horrifying return fans have been waiting for, but he's not rushing to spill all the details just yet. McFarlane admitted that after making early announcements in the past that never went anywhere, he's taking a different approach this time. He said they won't reveal anything until the script is ready and there's a buyer on board. Only then will they drop the full package: director, writer, cast, everything at once. According to him, the contract for this director literally just went out last week, and from his perspective, it's an A-list filmmaker. In his words, Spawn just keeps getting lucky, with top-tier talent wanting to be involved. This update comes nearly a year after producer Jason Blum confirmed that the first script draft had been finished, titled King Spawn. While it shares a name with the comic run, it's not the same story. Still, Blumhouse has continued to back the project, which is a huge relief since their horror track record speaks for itself. If and when this mystery director officially signs on, fans can finally expect the hellbound anti-hero to rise again with that signature Blumhouse horror edge. The Spawn reboot has been one of the most cursed comic book movies in Hollywood history. First announced all the way back in the early 2000s, it spent more than a decade stuck in development hell, endless rewrites, creative shakeups, and years of radio silence. But with a new title, King Spawn, and Blumhouse steering the ship, the same studio behind The Purge, Insidious, and The Black Phone, this could finally be the version that sticks. Oh, and it's officially rated R, so expect it to be every bit as dark and brutal as Spawn deserves. What really makes this reboot stand out is that it's not just another cookie-cutter superhero versus villain story. King Spawn is aiming for something way heavier: moral gray areas, questions of identity, loss, and even a touch of cosmic horror. If they pull it off, this could be a whole different kind of comic book movie, darker, more mature, and a lot more emotionally raw than what audiences are used to. This is the R-rated version longtime fans have been begging for since the 90s. The script is already finished, and the next step is securing the director. McFarlane says that call will be made within the next 3 months, and once it's official, they're planning to move straight into production. That means lining up the right producers, locking in full funding, and most importantly, keeping the studio suits from watering it down. Blumhouse is backing him all the way, and McFarlane has promised the R rating is non-negotiable. With the massive success of films like Deadpool and Joker, he feels like Hollywood is finally realizing R-rated superhero films aren't just doable, they're box office gold. If that's true, then Spawn might be the perfect anti-hero to lead this darker, more grown-up wave of comic book movies. Now it's just a matter of letting hell loose on the big screen. Back in the 90s, Spawn exploded onto the indie comic scene like a grenade, blowing a hole straight through Marvel and DC's monopoly. He was brutal, edgy, and completely anti-establishment. McFarlane has been clear from the start: Spawn was never meant to be a shiny-caped hero. His vision is to make him something mythic and terrifying, more like the xenomorph in Alien or the shark in Jaws, a force of nature, not a savior. And his ambitions go way beyond just one film. McFarlane has been dreaming of a full-blown Spawn cinematic universe for years, and King Spawn is supposed to be the cornerstone, a world dripping with darkness, moral dilemmas, and supernatural tension. Think the early days of the MCU, but with a grittier, nastier edge. If all goes well, it could open the door for stories about Gunslinger Spawn, She-Spawn, and a whole roster of twisted characters from the Spawnverse, each with its own tone and identity. But none of that can happen unless the first movie lands, and that's exactly what McFarlane is dead set on making sure of. Blumhouse officially joined the project back in 2017, and they brought exactly what this franchise has always needed: horror chops and a proven formula for making low-budget, high-impact movies. One of the earliest drafts was actually written by Todd McFarlane himself, and it was a massive departure from the comics. His version was stripped down, gritty, and indie in tone, focusing mainly on Detective Twitch. Spawn wasn't even the lead. He was more like a ghostly figure haunting the story from the shadows while the detectives tried to piece together the mystery. That draft even took place in the 1980s New York, skipping Spawn's origin entirely and throwing audiences right into the chaos. Some fans dug the concept, but it never got off the ground. McFarlane's whole strategy at the time was to keep the budget tight, somewhere between $10 and $20 million. That way, he could maintain creative control and keep studio meddling to a minimum. Jason Blum was on board with that vision, an R-rated, horror-driven comic book film that leans on atmosphere instead of spectacle, something that didn't look or feel like any other superhero flick. The script has gone through a long, messy evolution. McFarlane first started writing it back in 2010. By 2016, he had a 183-page draft, which is basically a novel by Hollywood standards. From there, other writers were brought in to refine it. Brian Tucker, Scott Silver, Malcolm Spellman, and Matt Mixon all took their turns shaping the story. That lineup isn't just random comic fans, it's a team designed to deliver something dark, layered, and dramatically mature. At one point, the plan was still to center the story on Detective Twitch, reimagined as a grieving father who gets caught up in a series of horrific crimes tied to a shadowy, inhuman presence. Spawn in that draft wasn't so much a character as he was an urban legend, always lurking, never fully in focus. We don't know how much of that angle survived into the current script, but it wouldn't be surprising if some echoes of it still remain. As for casting, Jamie Foxx had his eye on Spawn as far back as 2013, and by 2018 he was officially attached. Around that same time, Jeremy Renner signed on to play Detective Twitch. Even Michael Jai White, the original Spawn from the 1997 movie and the voice of the HBO animated series, has said he'd return, but only if the new film goes all the way into dark adult territory. He's been openly critical of the PG-13 approach from the past, and he's right. Spawn only works if you go all in. The thing is, Spawn doesn't have the luxury of being Superman, Batman, or Spider-Man. The average moviegoer doesn't know Al Simmons' story. To most people, he's just that badass-looking anti-hero from the 90s. And that's why the reboot really needs to ground itself with Spawn's origin. Sure, hardcore fans know it from the comics or the cult HBO show, but if the movie jumps straight into the King Spawn era without laying the foundation, it could end up alienating the very audience it needs to win over. The Spawn mythology has evolved a lot since the 90s. It's deeper now, more layered, and way more complex. Dropping viewers straight into the modern storyline without showing them where it all began would just be setting them up for confusion. McFarlane's comics work because every arc flows naturally from the last. The stories are tightly woven together, both emotionally and narratively. Without knowing Al Simmons' tragic downfall and how he became a Hellspawn in the first place, the newer chapters, including King Spawn, lose much of their emotional punch. King Spawn comic series debuted in August 2021, and it pushed the character into a larger mythos than ever before. This arc takes Spawn deep into the eternal war between heaven and hell, where he becomes tangled in a prophecy about the throne of hell itself. For the first time, Simmons is forced to make a defining choice about where he stands in this battle between ultimate good and evil. Unlike earlier stories where he played the lone wolf fighting against both sides, King Spawn positions him as a leader, someone with actual power in this supernatural war. That being said, there's no guarantee the movie is going to be a straight adaptation of that storyline. The title could just be a branding move, meant to separate this version from past failures and give the reboot a fresh identity. And honestly, that wouldn't be unusual. These days, comic book movies rarely adapt one storyline beat for beat. Instead, studios cherry-pick elements they like and build their own version. Sometimes that works brilliantly, other times it completely misses the mark. It really depends on whether the filmmakers understand the essence of the source material. Ideally, King Spawn the movie should strike a balance, blending the modern tone and big, mythic feel of today's comics while still grounding the story in Al Simmons' origin. Start with the man, show the betrayal, show the descent into hell, show the tragic deal that dooms him. Let the audience feel every ounce of that pain with him. Only then expand outward. Introduce the bigger mythology, bring in the new characters, and build toward the full-scale war between heaven and hell. That's how you make this story hit with the weight it deserves. King Spawn could be the project that finally breaks the curse. Hollywood has changed a lot, and a tone that felt closer to camp than horror. Audiences today are far more open to dark, violent, character-driven stories. If there was ever a time for Spawn to rise, it's now. What sets this apart is McFarlane's relentless push for authenticity. He's not chasing Marvel-style spectacle or DC's blockbuster scale. He wants Spawn to feel raw, mythic, and unsettling, like a nightmare crawling out of the shadows and onto the big screen. Todd has described Spawn less less like a superhero and more like a horror icon, closer to Freddy, Jason, or even Dracula. That's where Blumhouse comes in, because they know how to take horror concepts and turn them into box office gold without losing their bite. Blumhouse movies thrive on atmosphere, tension, and dread, which is exactly what Spawn needs to stand out in a superhero-saturated market. And with an R rating already confirmed, McFarlane is free to lean into the violence, the gore, and the psychological terror that defines Spawn's world. This isn't a story about a hero saving the day. It's about a broken man dragged through hell, cursed with unimaginable power and forced to walk the line between damnation and redemption. That unique identity could give King Spawn the kind of staying power most comic book reboots only dream of. Looking ahead, the real excitement isn't just about one film, it's about what this movie could spark. McFarlane has been vocal about building a full Spawnverse, expanding the mythology with characters like Gunslinger Spawn, Medieval Spawn, She-Spawn, and countless others waiting in the wings. Each of them offers a different flavor of darkness, opening the door to horror anthologies, spin-offs, and maybe even crossovers that redefine what a comic book cinematic universe can be. But all of that depends on King Spawn sticking the landing. If McFarlane, Blumhouse, and whoever this mystery A-list director is can deliver on their promise, then Spawn won't just return, he'll rise as the face of a new wave of R-rated, horror-infused superhero storytelling. And honestly, after decades in limbo, it's about damn time.